it's disproportionately harming lower educated, lower income women who are, like you're saying, they're probably more likely to meet psychopaths. They're probably less adept in some ways at screening for certain kinds of guys. And
Especially if they're
only
single
connected
mothers, they're a lot easier to prey upon. I mean, their straits are a lot more desperate, and they've knocked themselves out of the single girl dating market and lowered their market value, so to speak. Women mate across and up success hierarchies, and men mate across and down.
In today's video, Jordan Peterson discusses how single mothers and lower educated women are more likely to be taken advantage of on dating apps and generally in relationships. If you know someone in that situation, pay attention.
They broke down the data by education level, and they asked people questions like, have you ever been harassed on this dating app? Have you ever met someone on a dating app who inflicted physical harm on you? Basically, the wide variety of negative experiences through using dating apps. And they found that people who are not college graduates were far more likely to report negative experiences on the dating apps compared to college-educated women. And to me, this is also indicative of this, this sort of social class divide, another manifestation of the luxury belief of sexual promiscuity, where, you introduce these dating apps, you have no idea what's going to happen or how this is going to warp society and how people are going to interact in romantic relationships. And it's disproportionately harming lower educated, lower income women who are, like you're saying, they're probably more likely to meet psychopaths. They're probably less adept in some ways at screening for certain kinds of guys.
Especially if they're single mothers, they're a lot easier to prey upon. I mean, their straits are a lot more desperate, and they've knocked themselves out of the single girl dating market and lowered their market value, so to speak. I hate to speak of it in terms like that, but it's clearly the case, because to initiate a relationship with a woman who has a child already is to initiate a relationship that has a lot higher upfront cost. The complexity of negotiating the relationship with the child, the additional responsibility that has to be taken on instantly. And none of that's the least bit trivial. So that means, and we know that in general, imagine a triangular representation of a social hierarchy on any valued dimension. The people who are at the lowest level are those who are most susceptible to any sort of destructive tendency that comes whistling through. They don't have as much social support. They're a lot closer to abject poverty. They don't have the broad social network or the opportunities. So everything affects them disproportionately, including epidemic illnesses. And it's the case throughout the kingdom of life that low status confers vulnerability. That's why people go for higher status, at least in part.
So this idea of differently educated women, different social classes having different experiences on the dating apps, well, they're also having entirely different experiences in the real world too, in terms of their dating and romantic relationships after the erosion of marriage, after the sort of deteriorating norms around dating and romance. I talked to some people from my hometown, for example, and I think about, the kinds of guys who stayed behind, who didn't go off to college, who didn't join the military, who just sort of languished and hung around there. Just to put it bluntly, these are not, it's not Prince Charming. And so when women are dating these men and there's no social norms, no forces constraining them, many of them act very poorly, a lot of alcoholism, a lot of drug use, verbal and sometimes physical abuse, emotional abuse. A lot of these guys who sort of are not so educated, don't have a lot of money, not a lot of life prospects, when they get involved with a woman, they don't necessarily treat her very well. Whereas, in the past, I think that there were stronger norms around how you're supposed to treat the opposite sex and how you're supposed to interact with them, date them, what's expected of you, and so on. I think with the sort of dissolution of expectations has come a lot more trouble for lower income young women.
Is there anything you disagree about with what they discussed? If you have stories, share it in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, we think you'd really enjoy this one too. Also, check out our playlist where we organized our videos based on their topics. Thank you, and we'll see you again next time.